Guess we can start. We have everyone here. I'm going to call the capital projects meeting to order. And we don't have a lot of technical things to talk about today, but we have received some news that is hard to perceive in any other way other than extremely negative, which is the draft intended use plan came out for the SRF a week and a half ago. And the funded line is the red line that you see on the sheet, and we are 5 projects below the red line. So we just, there were just to give you a scope of what happened, there were 52 projects in the pool, 25 have been funded. This year alone, they had 357 million of carryover projects, so projects that they had already promised funding to. And in the next 4 years, they have $700 million in guaranteed carryover projects. So the SRF does not have enough money to fund the projects that are on the board. And so it looks like Chatham and Orleans got funded because they're previously funded. Falmouth and Yarmouth are the new projects from the Cape that got funded, and Dennis and Eastham are below the funding line. It's on the second page.
Oh, it's on the top, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It also was below the red line, if we're talking Cape Towns.
Who was?
Wellfleet,
And P-Town, yeah.
That's the one.
That's the line. So initially, and you know, Jackie can talk more, but initially we looked over the point system and thought, well, you know, there's some things that they didn't give us points for that we should have gotten points for, so we can crawl up those extra 4 points. But it's really not an issue of that as we're looking at it and we're talking to the SRF. It's more an issue of they just don't have the committed funding. SRF is 100% federal. It comes down through the states as kind of like an entitlement block grant through the EPA. So what they're doing is trying to figure out how to fund these projects with the money they already have or with some reduced level of funding. So that's why they have not funded everything this year. And they, the other piece of bad news that they have decided on is that they will no longer be funding projects in an ongoing basis. So even if we move up on the plan, we would get the first year's funding guaranteed, but we would not have a guarantee of funding for the second and third year. So, you know, we're looking at $170 million project. The most we could get this year would be 50. And then where does the other 120 come from?
Say funding by year, that means expenditures during those years, or is it?
It's the cap that they are giving us to spend.
Oh.
Yeah. So we can carry that over. Like we could spend the 50 million in 3 years if we wanted to, but we can't get more than that. So there's 2 things. Do you want, I mean, I don't. So there's 2 avenues. One is we can appeal this, try and get our points, which of course we're going to do. And try and move up on the list. And the public hearing for that is March 3rd. Yeah. So we have just, we have a couple of weeks to pull things together. We've already pulled some things together where we saw that we clearly could get points that we didn't get. One of the big categories that we didn't get points on, well, Jackie can talk about those, but so that's we'll be doing that. I've reached out to Julian Sear. The Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is having an emergency meeting on Monday. There's lots of political stuff going on, but again, they can't give out money that they don't have. So that's that part of it. And then Jackie, do you want to talk about potential for USDA? And then I want to turn it over to Rich too.
Ask a quick question.
Yeah.
You got the 4 points and you take our 170 and move it up.
Somebody else has to drop out.
Somebody else drops, plus it would still put us kind of over the line and under the line.
Yeah,
Really not.
we really need like 3 big projects to drop off. Plus, we need to get our points.
All these projects above the red line, pretty much a go-go, or could they not go?
So we don't know. They could not go. I mean, generally speaking, I know years ago, there used to be some project drop off on the water side. I don't know on the wastewater side whether there is, but all these projects need to go through town meeting for funding anyway. So some of them, what's happened in the past is they haven't gotten the funding and so they've been postponed for a year and then that amount of funding is available for this year. So it's not impossible to move up, but when you're a $50 million project, it's not like we're looking for 3 million. We could move up easier, but. So go ahead,
And-
Jackie, and please correct anything I said that was.
You know, you're perfectly right. And I think just for context, is historically, they fund all the projects in the first place, let alone tier 5. They told me that they've never not funded a tier 5 project. So that's new. And then I don't know if it's on this list, but another new thing they did was they didn't fund the whole project. So there are a lot of these projects that are under 50 million, say they asked for like 30, the state only gave them 10. They didn't automatically fund the full amount. And usually that 50 million that Jackie was saying is the cap. So typically they would have given us 50 million this year and then saved the rest 50 million each year. Like I noticed some projects on there, I think one asked for like 45 million and only got 12. So
And-
are they moving forward or not? Because they only got 12 out of the 45.
And in this that I gave you, there is 2 lists. One list is compares what the towns asked for versus what they got. And that would be obviously the projects above that red line.
But I guess kind of an update on USDA. So I met with 2 people that were the head of their program. This was before the IUP came out. And they were very excited to fund the project. And they wanted to use this project as a kind of like a guinea pig co-funding with SRF USDA. Because originally, and what we've done in the past for water projects is that SRF only funds the construction portion. And there are a lot of things they don't fund. So say we want the admin offices as part of the treatment plant, SRF wouldn't fund that. So USDA would typically, they called them soft costs. So that was kind of our original idea, but they want to be part of the construction. And when we kind of crunched all the numbers, they said their current loan rate is around 3%, and it's a 40-year loan, and that we would technically qualify for 75% grant. But the way they work is kind of projects would only be a few million from the state level they'd be able to give. So they have to then bring our project to the federal level and fight against all the federal projects to get money. And that 75% grant would only be if there was that money on the federal level. And originally before like last year's numbers, they were telling me it was around like $1 billion that they had. But now everything's kind of up in the air. They don't know how much money they're going to get, what's going to happen to just with everything federally.
So it's all current climate in Washington.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I was doing some research because I wanted to see, how sensitive are some of these piles of money to political pressure. And, I don't know if SRF could be eliminated altogether. The funding would stop altogether, but it can be reduced a great deal from what it is now. And I think that's probably going to be the trend. And that's what our state SRF is looking at, is going, oh my God, we've got all these commitments already made. We can't make new commitments because we're not sure what the funding stream is going to be. And that's a revolving loan. So obviously, as we pay back the money, it revolves. So it's not like the state would never have any money for SRF. It would just be limited, and probably my guess is the first thing they take away is the 0% interest. I don't know, Rich, do you want to
Yeah.
talk about? Financing.
Jackie.
Too.
I'm gonna share my screen for those of you that are online. So I handed out in the room here, a funding plan that it kind of had started. This was a few weeks ago. And I was really only working on this first column here, because that's where I thought we were gonna land. And I'm still carrying the same 160 million, so that could have been a little off, but that's where I started from. And what this shows on that first column is, if we had gotten what we had thought we were going to receive, which is a SRF 0% loan for 160 million, that's pretty easy math. It's 160 divided by 30 years. It's $5.3 million a year of debt service. There's some timing issues associated with that, but at its peak, right? So how do we pay for that? And so we've been setting aside, and we have a wastewater stabilization fund that can pretty much ensure the $1.5 million of short-term rental receipts is available for us. If it's a SRF project on the IUP, at the moment, we still have 25% subsidy from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust. Just for fun, this is a discussion point, for this committee and the finance committee as well. I had proposed potentially repurposing the 3% surcharge for the Community Preservation Act down to a 1.5% surcharge, but then adding a 1.5% surcharge for the water, wastewater infrastructure investment fund. It's a relatively new provision. So that takes 600,000 from CPA and puts that in the wastewater funding column. In between now and 2029, when this would all be coming on board, we have an opportunity to steward about $1.2 million of debt drop-off using the technique by manipulating the short-term rentals between now and then. So that's not real actual money. What that represents is a higher level of property taxes being raised. And as that debt drops off, maintaining it at that higher level so that when we bring on the full debt, it feels the same. But it's not real money. But that all adds up to about 4.63 million out of the 5.3 that we need. It leaves us about $700,000 short, which would be about 14 cents on a tax rate, or about $100 added to the property tax bill from what people are feeling.
No.
So that came up with so I felt like that was a pretty good result. And then I made a note under the old, thought process. We'd still be eligible for SRF subsidies, which on the water project were about $14.5 million. So that's about $475,000 on an annual basis to the debt service. So just that one thing alone, if we don't even get any other grants, we're pretty much down to a net zero on the property tax on this basis. So then again, of course, a week or two later, we get the indications that this might not work out. And I had also done the third column, so let's just go straight to the third column. The third column represents, we don't go through SRF. We finance it ourselves. It's estimating interest rate of 4.5%, I think is what I used, which means that over the life of the 30-year life of the project, you're paying the $160 million of principal plus another 100, whatever that is, the rest being interest.
100, more than 100, yeah.
Which would give us debt service of $2.4 million a year instead of 5.3.
12.4.
And that would decline each year by about $240,000 because obviously as you pay down the principal, you're paying less interest. But in all cases, every year, the 30 years of that would be more expensive than the 5.3 million of the SRF 0%. We still have the short-term rental available to us. We wouldn't qualify for the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust subsidy. Could still use the infrastructure fund. We could still steward debt drop-off. But we would not be eligible for SRF subsidies. So we'd have 3.3 million, meaning the property tax base would have to come up $9.1 million, which is over $1,300 of extra property tax. And this is all based on the median valued home.
Rich, why wouldn't we qualify for the Cape and Islands Water Protection 25%.
They require you to be on the SRF IUP.
Oh,
And then in the middle here, I just added recently. They were still getting SRF funding, but it's at either two, I think of 2.5 or 2.75% rate. So that adds interest costs, bringing it total cost paid out over 30 years to 226 million. So that's $9.6 million, decreasing $147,000 annually. All these other things are available to us, although under SRF subsidies, and that scenario probably aren't getting subsidies or much smaller amount of subsidy. And that brings us to 4.6 million. Funding, leaving the 5 million to the property tax base. It add about $1 to the tax rate, or $728 annually. So on this page here, obviously you can see the impact of a fully supported SRF 0% loan program. The decision points I'd like you to keep in mind is this water infrastructure fund and the CPA reduction. And I think that's it at this one. I have one more page to show you though. I've been fooling around with, is it possible to do betterments, for example? And thinking of the costs of some of these things, I would be hesitant to do a betterment on residential properties. But I think there's a case to be made that commercial properties derive a much larger development opportunity out of having wastewater. And so perhaps there's a case to be made, and that was a decision point I'd like this board to consider for discussion as we move forward. Do we agree with that philosophy, and to what extent do we want to pursue that? We've got a listing, there's 89 properties in the proposed phases, commercial properties. So this isn't exactly what we'd get, but I figured we'd just keep it easy. Everything else on this page is the same as the prior page, except this highlighted purple area. If we were to do a $2.5 million betterment, typically they're paid back over 20 years with some amount of interest. I didn't count interest because sometimes there's prepayments. But I just want to keep it easy. But 2.5 million over 25 years, over 20 years, is $125,000 of repayment per year. And if we have prepayments, we're allowed to put them in a separate fund and steward them for debt service. So we could, perhaps count on that amount of money, which brings down the bottom line to, the 0% financing is almost a break even, especially when you have subsidy. And then the SRF enhanced option, I guess, brings that down a little bit, but still pretty impactful to our residents, property tax wise. And so thought it was important to get these out so we could start thinking about them and talking about them. And then we have a couple decision points between the finance committee and this board as to, betterments and the CPA/WIF fund. And not reflected in any of this is, as Jackie Tupper indicated, the USDA, how impactful is that to us if we were to get some sort of award there? It does come with interest rates, but it's a 40-year payback. So it spreads it over a much longer time. So that might be, it's not as good as 0% interest, but it might get you better than, closer to zero.
And it's usually better than the public, the interest rate that we.
Market rate, yeah, market rate.
Crystal ball looking like 26, 27.
Well, see, that's the problem. Like, we don't know, but the indication, I mean, I'll know more after the meeting with Cape and Islands Water Protection on Monday, but if we're not guaranteed funding for a multi-year project, then I don't know how we present that to the taxpayers. Like, well, we have a 0% subsidy this year, but next year it may be something totally different. I mean, it's very hard to plan, right? So that would provide a challenge that we know we'll have for this year and perhaps for next year. I mean, they're being very clear about that.
How often does this get updated?
It gets updated once a year. And this is considered the draft plan, and then the final plan will come out right at the beginning of April. So after, but you know, I don't think there's been much movement in the past, other than, again, if a project drops out.
So basically, right now, I think we are proceeding that we're gonna make our appeal, get our points, get as high up in that list as we can. And, you know, if we luck of the draw and someone drops out, then we find out where we stand and what is on the table for us, right?
Mhm.
So I think we gotta keep moving forward and
Know that Aprilish.
Yes, oh, definitely. And me, you know, perhaps by April, we'll have a sense of what next year might be like. I don't know. It seems soon, but
Can I ask a question? The Cape and
course.
Islands, the Cape and Islands Fund, is there a way to change the legislation on that to be able to access some of that money with the changes to the SRF?
so the key term is change the legislation. So it is in the original legislation that was passed by both, you know, by the state legislature, that we have to use SRF.
I don't think that was in the legislation. I think that was in, Andy was adamant that be included in the regulations that the board formed.
It's in the regulations, but I thought it was because it was, but maybe not. But I suppose it's possible, but SRF is our fiscal agent for that program as well. So we'd have to restructure to get another fiscal agent.
And how much money is, do we know how much money is in there?
I mean, they could certainly change their mind and say, say you have to be on the plan, but you don't have to be in the funded part of the plan.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's a little bit of
Yeah.
wiggle room there because we pay into that, we should be able to.
But
I don't
even
know,
if we,
just-
even if we got that, we wouldn't, I mean, it's 25% of the
not
debt
enough.
service for the year up to the SRF loan amount. So it's, yeah,
Too small.
too small.
Sorry, I
I
just
mean, it's
needed to
not too
think that
small.
through.
We would take it if we could get it. We would take it. We would say yes, but
And actually just made me think of something on my calculations here. That middle column, that subsidy would go up because 25% of 9.6 is a bigger number than 25% of
yes, that's
5.3.
true.
So I honestly, I don't know that the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust has that kind of money.
No, we just restructured last year so that we would be able to handle the additional projects that were coming through with our funding stream. I mean, our that funding stream has been pretty stable since the beginning of the rental tax, but that's only from 2018. So it's not like a huge history of what happens, but
And one of the problems of opening up the regulations on that is now you've opened up the door for everybody else that's participates in the trust, and they're a much bigger town, have more influence, and be careful what you ask for because you could open it up and then
Yeah.
all the bigger towns that have active projects are going to want all their money too.
yeah. So
Stand for you.
AM. Oh, asset management. So they have a category that they fund that's asset management. So it's older rehabilitation projects. And there's a certain amount of funding that goes to asset management every year. And there's a certain, loan forgiveness and stuff that they get that's special. I was just trying to figure out, like where we really stood if anybody dropped out.
Jackie, did you say, excuse me, did you say in the beginning that even if we moved up the list for this year, we'd get them 50 billion, but there's no guarantee it'd be recommitted?
That's right.
That's a change too, or just? back to,
That's a change this year and it's explained. They state it in this draft plan document that I gave you.
right.
And I think they're making that decision for the next 4 years until they've cleared that $700 million worth of previously funded projects. But I would think that would be a policy decision they could make every year. I mean, if suddenly the funding comes back, I'm sure they could change that, but we couldn't count on it.
I thought I heard that they took money out of clean water and gave it to drinking water and prioritized lead line projects and PFAS projects.
Yeah, and that's possible too, yeah.
Very, this thing got put off. He didn't go to the public. Cost will be higher later on, obviously.
Yeah.
About penalties on Eastham and taxpayers that way as far as the,
Well, see, we were talking about that. It seems unrealistic that, you know, we have done everything that we could do, right? So for us, I think we have a great case that they should extend whatever deadline they have in the DEP regulations. It's not our fault that we can't proceed because we'd be ready to proceed. So unless town meeting were to vote it down, I mean, if town meeting voted it down and we couldn't proceed, then yes, we would be on the hook, but I don't think we're on the hook for this. And I think we just make a case that we couldn't do it. It's not financially feasible. But it's a, you know, it's a risk, but it's,
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about this philosophically is, things have been done for the Cape over the last, 5 to 10 years to finance and support wastewater infrastructure. And now we're at a point where it's not enough. But the point being, one of the reasons it's not enough is because Barnstable got a 20-year plan where every year they're doing something. Dennis is doing a brand new system. Yarmouth is doing a brand new system. Falmouth is implementing systems. Mashpee's on the list. So you got all these towns across Cape Cod doing projects, and I forget the count, but at one count I was up to like $4.5 billion of wastewater infrastructure on Cape Cod. So, and my point would be, absent funding additional programs for towns that are coming down the pipe now, I would say that we are making progress as a region to address nitrogen loading, and you can't possibly address it all at once.
or blame one little teeny town on the
And
outer
I would
Cape.
submit that Yarmouth and Dennis and Falmouth have much more nitrogen removal higher priority than Eastham is. Much more nitrogen, much more denser populations. So, that's valid that those go first.
It's hard to
So give
argue
us the
with.
time to go, second or third when those projects wind down and there's more funding available. So, so this is all pretty fresh, and Jackie spoke to the state senator, and, now the politicking happens, and what comes out of that, and does anything change? Probably not in the near term, but over the next year or two.
Yeah. And is it responsible to even ask? I mean, if we didn't have USDA funding and we don't have SRF or Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund funding, and we know that, it's not responsible to ask. We can't afford it. And that's every year. It's
Yeah,
not
right.
going, yeah. I mean, I think with water, certainly it was the same big impact, but it was every 18 months, a new 20 million was coming on, or roughly. Sometimes it was 15, sometimes it was 13, but so your taxes kept going up, and obviously people have noticed that, but they were going up in, $300 increments.
Yep. Not sticker shock.
Yeah. So this is a little different, and it's, they tried. I mean, I don't know if we can think of a way to break it down that makes sense because, you know, even if we put some pipes in the ground or something, you know, it doesn't make sense. Right, so. So again, you know, we'll probably know more, certainly within the next couple of weeks, but I just didn't want to give, I mean, I was very, very optimistic with the select board at first because I thought it was just an issue of points. And if it's just an issue of points, it seems like it's an easier hill to climb, but it really isn't. It's an issue of there isn't sufficient funding for all the projects that want to move forward, even on the Cape and Islands, let alone the other towns. So.
And Jackie, when you say can't afford, you're presupposing, I mean, I'm just, to make sure I understand, you're presupposing that that third column that Rich just showed with the $1,300 increase,
Yeah,
that you just perceive that to be a non-starter, so that's why you're calling it
that's
unaffordable. I
correct.
just want to make sure,
Yeah.
not unaffordable in theory, but unaffordable in practice.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that would be if I mean, my house is in that median range. So, and there are many, you know, many houses above that range. So they'd be paying $2,000 a year.
Well, I understand. Okay, yeah.
So,
Okay.
Out of curiosity, what's the points the other towns are getting that we're not getting?
oh yeah, Jackie, you can do that one.
They're one issue more than anything else. Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, we aren't in violation. So you get more points if you actually have some kind of order against you to do it. Um,
Just wait a couple of years. We'll get great points on that.
and I think a lot of them were somewhat technicalities, which why we felt like we could fight for them. Like, for example, we were supposed to get, I think, 3 points for proving that the groundwater is impacting our public water supply, which we submitted significant data from the water project of elevated nitrogen levels. We did all of that back then. So I submitted all of that data, but then it's kind of like, oh, well, that data is too old. So it's like trying to get more updated data or things like that, that seems doable. A few points, like more specific data. They wanted more like temperature values for the ponds and things like that. But I think the big categories we did submit kind of the green kind of area. We submitted for energy efficiency at the plant, which they didn't count any of that because it's a new plant. But it looks like we could kind of 2 big categories where we could get points, which we didn't submit it on originally because it's added cost to the project. But if we make the building a LEED certified building, that could get points. And then if we use renewable energy for the building, but it has to be a certain percentage. So you get only a couple points if it's 20%, a lot more points if it's over 50%. So we were looking at solar panels, and then we can say that we're going to do this, but then there are different things we can do, like do an audit or put together the calcs to kind of prove what the energy levels would be, and just kind of, I think that was the main area.
That that was the bulk of where we could have gotten more points.
Construction doesn't have to be LEED
It does to
does.
get points.
to get points, but not state mandate, right? Yeah.
No.
Well, to get the maximum amount of points. I mean, normally the tier 5 projects we started with 100 points above all the other categories. So usually that's enough, you know, they're giving us 100 points because we're in they consider, you know, the Cape.
So the goal would be not to add costs for green things, but now it's okay, we'll add the cost because you're saving, you're
Right.
getting more
Yep.
later.
Points.
Like ballpark, I was thinking hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of
Hundreds.
thousands. Well, like I know when we went over this with the school project, you know, it was like, okay, so the levels, we were talking about the levels of, do we get it solar ready or do we put solar panels on? Do we do geothermal heat, which I know the cost for that was over $8 million. So it depends on what you're talking about too. I mean, this footprint wouldn't be as big as the school footprint for geothermal, so, but. It's too bad, right? Do we have any more? I don't think so. I think that got maxed out.
Now, we had considered doing solar canopy at the transfer station.
Yeah.
But the bids came back that it was not cost effective.
Transfer station, police station, and town hall we were asking for. And they were all too small. The projects were too small. So. Right?
So at what point do we call a halt to what we're doing now?
Well, I mean, we started to talk about that this morning. I'm not sure we do, because whether we do it now or we do it 5 years from now or 3 years from now, or what if it could happen next year? I mean, I think we have that money for design and engineering, and we want to design and engineer the treatment plant and the collection system. So why wouldn't we just get the design to a point where it's ready to go if we need to move?
So do all the other towns, Jackie, have design work like we're commissioning in process? Are they finished? Are they ahead of us on that sort of side of things?
I think most of the towns would be on this list, would probably be ahead of us, except the new ones like Yarmouth. I'm sure Yarmouth is in process like we are.
Right.
Dennis is in process like we are. They might be at different levels, but I think those 3 towns, I would say, are all in the same batch.
Are there points given for a complete design done and dusted? Is that something that gets some of these other people higher up on the list, that they're ready to put shovels in the ground?
No.
No,
No, but I would say,
I just wondering, yeah.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
say in Yarmouth, just because I'm familiar with the situation there, they had a 90% design completed back in 2012, and it failed miserably at town meeting and went
Huh.
down in flames. And here we
Huh.
are,
Wow.
10, 11, 12 years later, same design, updated for
Yeah.
flows and
Flows.
completed, and they're in construction.
Yeah,
Huh.
so I wouldn't, I mean, I feel like we shouldn't pull the plug on
Right.
this, because we don't, the truth is, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. We don't know what's going to happen over the next year. I don't know.
And I think it's really one of our defenses if someone were to come after us is, hey,
We're
we
ready.
did all the work, we've been ready to go, and we kind of got the rug pulled out from us a little bit on the SRF funding.
A little bit.
But we need to cut it off.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's probably, and, I was thinking of that too, and I was gonna ask you about this morning and I forgot, but I think we need to let GHD know that that's the truth too, so that they don't take their foot off the gas and, they know, but they, probably think of it differently. Like, we have clients above the line. We'll just focus on the clients above the line, right?
Hmm.
Pressure's off. Sure, that's their thoughts, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that would be my first thought if I were them. Oh, I wonder if the town's going to want to proceed at all. Yes, we do.
The other thing too is you don't want to waste money either, and you want to keep pressure on to get it done. You
Right.
don't want to space it out.
No.
Right, the longer it goes for
Yeah,
consultants,
let's
it's,
just do it. So it is bad, there's no way to reframe it as not bad news. This is horrible news. And obviously there are factors in this that we did not anticipate, that the state didn't anticipate, that none of us anticipated on the federal level, that, we have limited control over, and we just have to ride this wave the best we can. And gather as much intel over the next few weeks as we can, and make the best decisions for the town that we can. Well, it's a state program, so we've always presented it as a state program. So the first question I asked Rich when, was, is this state or federal? And I had to go research it, but it is clearly federal through the EPA. And unfortunately, during the last 4 years between ARPA grants and extra money for green energy, they funded the EPA, the Biden administration funded the EPA heavily so that there was more money coming down for this type of environmental project. Chunk. Yes. What they're saying is that they get a set amount per year right now, but that can be earmarked from Congress. So they can't say, well, one state's going to get it and one state's not going to get it, but they can go through and say, we're going to take $10 million for this project and we're going to take 10 million for that project. And it doesn't necessarily have to be related. So they can whittle it down.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah, so I think they got the revolving fund, but they have the problem of when they have been making decisions over the past 4 years, they've been thinking that new money was always coming. So they have, and it has been always coming. So I think that's where they made commitments of $700 million to the projects that are already in play. And they did the same thing to us when we did water. They didn't say, we're going to fund water for 1 year. They funded phase 1 and then they funded phase 2, so. And the only difference between year to year was how much you were going to get. You knew you were going to get something. You just didn't know always exactly the amount.
This scenario going forward, they did make the line and they said you got 50 million, but you don't know what the next 2 years are going to be. So,
Well, I think-
how would you approach that?
Tim?
Well, I think if we're gonna go to the town, we probably have to go for the full boat, understanding that we're only gonna borrow it if we get the favorable terms. So if we got 50 million and there's no guarantee for the future, we got some decisions to make. It's not unprecedented that towns have built out at least portions of their collection system in advance of even having a treatment plant. So maybe you move forward on, hey, we'll build out, do a contract on a piece of it, hoping that by the time you get 3-4 years down the road, there's a plant in
Mhm.
place,
Can't really have a plant operating system.
Can't build the plant first.
Right? I mean, I think our project is particularly tricky for this time because other projects, they can, like we could in water, you can split it out. If it's an extension or whatever, it's easier to,
Not furthering a collective collection.
right. But I do understand, I mean, I don't hold it against them. I understand there's certain really old systems in towns that are poor, like Lowell and, Haverhill, that need clearly need the assistance and, if they don't do it, they're gonna have septic leaks and, so there's asset management projects they have to do. As Rich said, are they gonna choose Eastham before Falmouth? Probably not, who would? Falmouth has 19 estuaries. They have like 19 bodies of water they have to clean up, so.
And I saw that a lot of the points you could get were on like combined sewer overflow type situations with existing systems.
Oh, yeah. So improvements in existing systems.
They're creating CSOs or,
Yeah, like getting rid of them.
getting rid of.
And right now, the state of Massachusetts is still emphasizing green projects. I don't, looks like the federal government may go a different way. So will they just take all the green money away, but give us other money? I don't know. It's hard to imagine that Massachusetts can come up with a bond bill that would fill this gap quickly. I suppose that's an option too.
What's the timeline on the USDA?
Good question.
That's the
figured
question we
I'd throw
can
that out
never
there.
answer, Steve.
Okay.
I mean, right now we have 5 projects going with the USDA. All of our town landing and stormwater projects are all USDA projects. And they're moving, but they all move slowly. It's not a quick moving funding source. We did get one big USDA loan for water,
Around 2 million.
but I think that took 3 years.
Okay.
And that level of funding was something they could still kind of do at the state level. Whereas this, they couldn't really promise us anything because they take our application and then bring it to the federal level and they fight for it.
And we're not a small project. I mean, it's, to us, it's a small project. It's expensive.
The only dates they kind of gave me was, oh, you should submit by April, May, which obviously we're doing it right now. But
And Rich, what was the interest rate on USDA? It was over 40 years at what rate?
I think I used 2.75 in my presentation.
Okay.
Like when we were doing water, it was under 2%. It was like, we actually did better with the USDA rate than the SRF rate of 2.4%. So
Mhm.
USDA was like 1.8 and there's loan forgiveness. But, you know, again, it's a federal program. So
Right.
what are the terms going to be? How much money is going to be available? None of us know.
So if you start down the road of using, you look at column 3, right, and you're doing it, be damned with anybody else's money, then all of a sudden the logjam clears and there is money. Do you get walled off from going back to the SRF now that you've started down your own road, or can you go back?
No,
Well, except that we're building all this over, I don't know,
3 years.
18-month to 3-year period, right? So it's pretty tight, unlike the water project's been going on for
10
10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of need to have all your money lined up front.
Because theoretically you could be done before the logjam clears.
Yeah, and we're going
theoretically.
to be we have to sign contracts, so we have to
Right,
have the
right,
money
right.
available. I mean, technically speaking, when Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund came into play, they actually gave money to Chatham and Provincetown, who had gone ahead and done it on their own, done their water projects on their own, or their wastewater projects on their own, you know, up to 20 years ago. I think Chatham's was 20 years old, but so, I mean, that was kind of controversial, but they did that, so.
Okay.
We might be able to get the 25% back.
There are a couple things, I guess, just to get on your radar. This aside, you know, we have to flesh out how things look about what are we going to present to town meeting. But one thing I think we're still set on is still need to acquire a parcel across from Salt Pond Landing, because it's just regardless, it's a priority site for a pump station. It's in the low end. And so we probably would be moving forward with at least that money for that taking as part of the wastewater planning. At least that.
And it has some value for stormwater as well. Yeah, it's a private parcel, but we own it's a condo unit with 4 units and we already own 2 of them. We took 2 by tax title.
That big brown one?
Yeah.
I think I know.
Yeah, so we move, yeah, because that would save us money.
That white building is in the back, is also part of that parcel?
No, it's 2 brown buildings.
The ones I can see if I look kind of.
Yeah, and you have to look up. The other one is on the hill above it. It's a two-family buildings. So we own, unfortunately, half of each building. So it makes sense to take it for a lot of reasons, but we were looking at it for a pump station. And the layout of the road is very narrow. What? No, it wouldn't be a tax taking. It would be a, yeah,
How did you get the other two?
tax taking. And the next question is, if we sell those, we have to give them the money. So we can't keep the money if we sell those 2 units. We can't,
And that's where you want.
Yep. And the other thing is that that is the narrowest spot of the Route 6 layout. And we ran into this when we were trying to do stormwater on the other side of the road. There's not enough road layout there. So it's a really useful parcel for us for, you know, it could be for 4 or 5 different reasons, but yeah.
Well, right now the stormwater is going right into Salt Pond, so nitrogen aside, you got out whatever else is in road runoff that you're remediating.
And we're doing a lot of engineering on the other side of the road to try and manage it when really it should be managed on that side. of the road.
That's the state.
This is the third time at the USDA for that project.
State road.
It's a state road. And they have decided they're going to help us pay to survey it and to move ahead with the Route 6.
But they're not gonna do anything with the remediation of the water, right? Of the waste, the runoff.
No, not right now. Yeah, that was good news that we got, but it's, the good news is this big.
So you have to take that taken to the town meeting.
And we have to try. But it will cost money because we have to pay for those other 2 units. We have to pay for the parcel.
Well, that's the good news, right? It ought to make, you know, if we have the funding with our short-term rental, not dedicating it to a bigger project at the moment, you know, we can use this year's money to basically make that acquisition.
What was the other thing you wanted? You said there were things you wanted to on the record.
Other town meeting questions.
For wastewater?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Well, I think depending on what we find out in the next few months, are we going to be asking, for instance, are we going to be bringing wastewater, but asking to fund it contingent on the possibility of SRF funding or USDA funding? You know, like sometimes we ask for a capital project contingent on grant funding or contingent on, or do we just wait? You know, we can wait as far as, even for next year, we can wait as far as September. We have to know if we're applying for SRF, we have to know by October whether town meeting voted on it or not.
So that's another option, if let things shake out a little bit, and if they shake out favorably, then we would have a special town meeting perhaps.
Yeah, it has its advantages.
Values that are listed. Those are the full project values.
No, I don't think so.
No, these are the one I gave you is just what's, yeah, being funded, what's
The only
being
ones that
funded.
These are
get
already
passed
been chiseled.
into
Yeah.
the end use plan.
So see, we have to get rid of some of these big multi-million dollar ones.
So all of these are low numbers,
Yeah.
the asset management numbers.
Well, that's kind of the,
But you can see the difference between what they ask for and what they get.
So
I guess I guess I should read the book. These ones, they show you what they ask, request, and what the grant is. And no, I don't know what the payment is.
yeah, like they asked for 5 million, they got 5 million on some of them, but
but there's some big ones where they have well, I'm not sure if those are carryovers or not. But that's
Yeah.
kind of, but that's the opportunity. Is there a big project that didn't get their full funding that now causes that town to want to do the project? And if they drop out, then maybe that's our opportunity.
But they have to drop out by this new.
well, they have to drop out anytime within the next 6 months, right? But I agree with you, Fred. It is difficult because like I know when we were doing water, ours was funded. We had passed through town meeting, we got the authorization, we went to SRF, and then SRF said to us, 2 other projects have pulled out. They did not pass town meeting. They didn't get their votes at town meeting. So there's 16 million more available. And so we said, yes, we'll take it. And we put it into phase 1. So we did phase 1 faster. So I don't know whether they give preference to people that are already funded when they get extra funding or. But if we haven't gone through town meeting. So,
So would that argue for then going to town meeting and using that contingent kind of a clause, just so that you have something voted on? Because then if you didn't go and someone else fell off because they decided to cancel their project, but you hadn't gotten the vote, you'd be SOL then.
right, because we have to apply formally in October.
Right.
So. But
No, I think the idea would be you would hold, well, you could do it contingent, that's the front-loaded thing, but if you didn't feel confident being able to get that through town meeting, you don't want to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth for not a well-thought-out plan. So you
Right.
might hold it with the idea that you're planning on a special town meeting in September for this issue.
Alone. Okay. Yeah.
now, Jackie, what if, has anyone ever done a special town meeting like in December? Like, if we have to apply in October, in order to apply, we have to have the town meeting vote, or no, we don't have to have it
Zia
until.
had his
Oh,
hand.
Zia,
Yeah, I could speak to that. We just did that similar in Marshfield this
Yeah.
December. They just set the town meeting. It was December 16th, and they voted on one particular subject, which is the Plymouth Ave pumping station. They passed it.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, so that's a possibility too, even going a little later. All right, that's good to know.
Sure.
There, you'll be more than 50% through your design at that point.
But that's okay, because we're gonna, yeah.
Estimating services. And
Yeah.
get better numbers, chiseling away at it a little bit, so.
No doubt.
May not be good numbers, but they'll be hopefully more.
How likely is it that they're gonna be good numbers?
Well, I saw the 170.
I'm starting to think like you now. Where is that happy, sunny, optimistic Jackie? All right, well, that's all we have, and I'm sorry to lay the load on you.
You started your meeting with the town manager.
That's starts tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow at 11 at the library. And we will also meet other times. We're very flexible. We've had complaints that 11 is not a good time, so whatever they want to meet with me, I'll meet with them.
I responded back, we're available nights, weekends, and early mornings,
Yeah,
but
We're
they still
available.
haven't taken me up.
We're available. We
So
can
is
be
it
available.
by drop-in or by appointment?
It's a drop-in thing for now. We're gonna see. Tomorrow, I'm just gonna see what is coming in the door. And then what we thought we might do is set up a time, like the next time I'd bring Rich. If we have a lot of financial things, or if we're gonna talk about water, infrastructure, whatever, we'll bring Hillary and Rich with me, or whatever I think
Initially, there's no presentation or.
Mm-mm. It's just really, what question do you want to ask? What do you, and, we've done this with the Part-Time Resident Taxpayers Association every summer. They ask questions. And, oh my God, they ask a lot of like, sometimes we've had, I don't know, over 150 cards with questions on them. And if I can't answer it in the room, then I just get the answer and then come back, or type them back. So that's kind of how I thought of it. We'll just see what people are interested in talking about, whether it's potholes or snow plowing or, wastewater or water.
But the way I read it
budget.
in your flash there, it seemed like you were trying to focus it toward wastewater.
I'm trying to focus it on the things that we're moving towards town meeting with, so that people can ask those
Mhm.
questions if they want to. So that's where we're trying to sort of guide people by saying, look at this online, look at Rich's budget proposal, and then ask any questions that you have. So. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be interesting to see what people, because you know, as I said earlier today, like on Facebook, I'll put my number that goes right to my desk. I have put that on Facebook. I can't even tell you how many times, and I've only gotten one call. So, you know, I think if I make myself available, let's see what happens.
Thank you.
And then I'll bring the staff with me. Yeah. Library's a great place to hang out. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know you'll have some time to think about it now. Rich and I have had like a week to try and process it. I still go through spirals. So. Hillary's optimistic though. She's.
As for your design, you haven't stopped anything at this point.
No.
Surveys are underway, geotech and all that.
We haven't, the field work hasn't started yet,
It
but
hasn't
we
started.
we did all the markouts. We're just getting the ground penetrating radar out first before we start. So everything should be in the next couple of weeks.
As far as the facility design, have they started doing anything other than just laying out the building so far?
I know the surveyor's been out the past couple of weeks. The archaeologist was out, I think, last Monday. And we're still on track, so 30% would be first week of March. So we were trying to schedule the 30% design meeting sometime in March.
And
Mm.
your 30% is.
Mhm.
Oh, when our 30% would be? Probably more like April.
I mean, we do have the conceptual design. We have the number of pumping station, the alignment, the force main. It's just more refining the 30% based on survey and based on some conflicts that we're probably gonna have. But I think our 30% will come pretty quick.
Right now, we were kind of vetting. I think the map that I showed last time was still conceptually the same, and then we've been going back and forth, kind of ironing out the pump stations. So we were originally looking at, say, the Historical Society, kind of on the corner near the visitor center. Looked into that, realized that wasn't going to work with permitting. So we were kind of thinking of shifting to maybe the elementary school or the visitor center. And I think we're on the Thursday meeting for the Elks Lodge. That would be a good location for all of the northern part of Route 6.
Yeah. When you do your estimating services, I know you got 3 different color groups as far as phase 1. You pricing it within those color groups, or are you just doing the price for the whole thing? For
Well, good
example, if the
question.
price came in too expensive and you said, okay, well, maybe we skip that area. I mean, how do you pricing up
Yeah.
as far as presenting it to the
Well,
town
right now we have it broken out
for those
for the different groups.
different color groups there?
Mhm.
Okay.
Because I know, Rich, you mentioned like he was doing projections on the different kind of scenarios and what the capital cost would be versus the operation costs and things like that.
Yeah. And then we always end up with, you know, you're going down this street, you only have the left side on the plan. Like, I mean, GHD, when they did the first iteration, they only had like one side of Route 6. Does that make sense to anyone? And so you ask yourself those questions, but then it starts to grow.
Yeah, and kind of what I was hoping to get is, people, if you're doing more than what you're required to do, sometimes people complain or get antsy about, we're doing more than we need to.
Yeah.
But not realizing that extra capital cost is peanuts compared to the additional revenue you might get on the operating side. So when you add in the operating revenues and operating costs, of which the incremental cost to add more are negligible. So you're really just adding revenue that's going to help pay for the capital. And you'd much rather have the flow and the revenue to pay for the operating costs. So.
Sorry.
Just had to be sitting on this news all the time.
I know. Well, I didn't want to, we found out on Friday afternoon and I didn't believe it. I was like, no. I'm going to look Monday and it's going to be fine.
Do you think the state is just anticipating, federal cutbacks or not? I mean, because it sure looks like that's what they're up to.
I definitely think they're anticipating federal cutbacks because it's an EPA program.
Right.
And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a target, Peter, because it was indeed a program that got more funding during the Biden administration. So, you know, it's lit
Right.
up kind of on their map right now, I think.
You wonder it's clean water, a different thought pattern for them versus
Right.
clean cars. windows.
Maybe.
You know, it's like,
We could hope.
good hope, yeah.
Thank you all.